Hey guys, welcome back to Libby's Lounge, Patreon edition, where we are recording the unofficial audiobook of the Assassin's Alliance. We are on chapter 34. Let's dive right in. Chapter 34 Maureen, 8 months later. 1996. I didn't know she was pregnant. The weight of that will never leave me, nor should it. I failed her. I believe she was working with Elijah on the next generation of sin, the reward of those trials outweighing the ire I was receiving from Hale's security for her absence. By the time I learned the truth, it was too late. I wish she would have trusted me. We could have come up with a different solution. Any other solution. Elijah has disgraced our legacy, and I will never forgive him. As long as I live, I will make sure he will never succeed me. I don't know that Olivia will ever be the same. When she thinks I'm not looking, I can see the haunted look she tries to hide from Andrew, from everybody. I've tried to offer counsel, but she won't confide in me. I'm afraid we're losing her. There needs to be more compartmentalizing, Maureen said, and pulled the notebook back toward her, flipping back a few pages. They sat in Elijah's temporary office on Rosemary's compound. For the last 8 months, she and Elijah spent weeks on end building up and breaking down the bylaws of Legacy and Legacy Inc., finding the weaknesses and the strengths, where the laws failed, and how becoming more corporate would benefit them all. To be honest, it was a brilliant plan, and Maureen hated that she actually agreed with some of it, like your children not having to be indoctrinated against their will. But Elijah couldn't see the faults in his plan, no matter how many times she pointed them out. He wanted to integrate the two entities, a merger to bring Legacy into the 21st century. It couldn't work the way he wanted, but he wouldn't hear a word against it. It didn't matter, though, because she could undo all the damage she was causing once her baby was safely adopted and she was back in New York City. Look here, she said, handing it back to him. In this one, you do at least 3 divisions, with no more than 13 in each. More than that, they'll start talking, which is what you're trying to avoid. Then I can interchange within the divisions as needed when the inevitable casualties arise, Maureen finished, leaning back into the leather sofa. She rested a hand on her round belly. If you do it right, each one will think they are the only division working for you. Makes them feel superior, but replaceable, as teammates are inevitably cycled through. Elijah looked over from the adjacent armchair and smiled. I like it. It will take some time to restructure, though. And this is hinging on the cooperation of Francis, she added. But getting Inc. running as its own entity with structure first is key. Then we go from there. And your team will take the lead? She asked. That was the arrangement, Maureen said, keeping the sourness from her tone. Once the baby is safely away, I'll bring them on board. Francis, too, once we're ready. We'll be ready within a month if you return, Elijah countered. We need the legitimacy in order to win the graveyard contracts. I already told you. I'll handle Hale when we're ready. You'll have them, Maureen said, and dropped her head back, ignoring the swirl of anxiety in her shoulders. Jeffrey had told Elijah everything he knew, including Maureen's role at Hale. Not only did she have her team to protect from Elijah, she had Oliver. Rosemary didn't tell you? Maureen sat up and grimaced, stomach tightening with a contraction. Braxton Hicks, the midwife had called them. Not dangerous, just her body getting ready for labor. Ugh, tell me what. Here. Elijah stood, disappearing from view for a moment, and returned with a bottle of water. He opened it and held it out. Thanks. She took several long gulps, the baby squirming as the muscles relaxed. They're getting more frequent. Apparently it's very normal, Maureen said, repeating the midwife's words. I just need to hydrate more, and not be so stagnant. Rosemary and I have a training session this afternoon. They usually feel better after that. Concern flitted across his face. Training? Solo combat drills, Maureen assured. We stopped hand-to-hand combat about a month ago. I was getting too big to stay balanced safely, and Rosemary called it cheating since she couldn't hit my stomach. Elijah laughed, the sound easing the tension in Maureen's shoulders, and she asked again. Tell me what? Intel says Onyx was offered contracts from the graveyard as well. It's why Hale's missions had been so light. The longer this takes, he held up the notebook, the more competition we will have. You can handle Hale quietly, but what about Onyx? We need to get Legacy Inc. out there if we stand a chance of doing this legitimately. Well, first things first, Maureen said. I have to get the team on board, and that might take some time. I have complete faith in you, he assured, the words filled with sincerity, and she hated that she believed him. He reached out a hand and pulled her to her feet. I'm going to make some lunch. Do you have time to look over the latest SIN reports before your not sparring session? Maureen felt her eyes light up. I will skip the not sparring sessions for a look at those, she said, and followed him out of the office. You're doing great, the older midwife said, glancing away from her to the door as it creaked open. Maureen couldn't remember her name. Was it Elena or Ariana? Maureen dropped her head back, trying to breathe through the contraction as her muscles tightened, the pressure from the baby making her feel like she was going to rip in two. She had never experienced such intense pain and grit her teeth into the washcloth even harder, her gums aching as she stifled a scream. Rosemary stepped inside, a stack fresh of washcloths balanced in her hand. Her eyes flicked over Maureen with an unreadable expression, but said nothing as she crossed the room and set the washcloths on the table by Maureen's feet, the smell of sweat hanging heavy in the air between them. Maureen bit back a groan as another contraction seized her knuckles white from gripping the bedsheets. She'd been in labor for 2 days. Every muscle and fiber of her being ached. Yet all of the people she'd imagined being at her side for this, it was never Rosemary. She wanted Andrew and Eileen. She wanted Oliver, or hell, even Mike. But thinking of Mike brought thoughts she'd rather not visit. Was he worried she never came home from her vacation? What had Frances told her father? What had her father told them? If Mike and Oliver knew she was holed away, scared and alone, they would burn the compound to find her in a heartbeat. The thought felt like a physical blow. She fucking missed them. But no one was there except Rosemary, as she had been for the last 8 months, her punishment for trying to lie to Elijah. Babysitting duty. She hadn't been the worst company, but if Maureen never had to see her again, it would be too soon. Rosemary held up a fresh washcloth. Maureen choked on a sob and gave a short nod, pulling the damp rag from her mouth. Rosemary's face relaxed, and she dipped the cloth into the ice water beside the bed and put it on Maureen's forehead. A shiver rippled down her spine. It wasn't much, but the contrast to her boiling skin grounded her, and she exhaled a shaky breath. Exhaustion threatening to take her. You're burning up, Rosemary muttered, her voice soft. She dabbed the cloth over Maureen's temple, her movements surprisingly careful. No shit, Sherlock, Maureen rasped, her voice hoarse. Rosemary looked like she was going to say something, but she pressed her lips together instead. That was what Rosemary had been good at, keeping her mouth shut. Maureen had had 8 months to think about this moment, about how she'd gotten here. She'd made a lot of mistakes. The biggest one, drugging Seamus. But Rosemary shouldn't have shot her to begin with, shouldn't have dragged them into this whole mess. Why didn't you warn us? Rosemary paused, her jaw tightening, while she dipped the cloth back into the icy water and wrung it out with a sharp twist. I heard about your second sin trip, she said. Forgive me for not wanting to join the club. This? She gestured to the house around them. You? You are my punishment for disobeying him in the first place. Maureen let out a bitter laugh, cut short by another contraction that tore through her. She dug her nails into the mattress, her teeth clenching until the pain passed. Thank you. It was not what Maureen intended to say, but the last 8 months hadn't been the worst, and Maureen hadn't been alone. The words hung between them. Rosemary's hand faltered, and for a moment Maureen thought she might throw the cloth down and leave. But instead, Rosemary nodded. You're welcome. The tension between them eased. It wasn't trust or forgiveness that passed between them, but a fragile truce. And it was enough for Maureen to let go of the anger and concentrate on bringing this baby into the world. The door opened again. Elijah, dressed in a blue suit and sharp brown shoes as if he'd just come from a board meeting, strode in, followed by a black man in his 30s. The newcomer wore scrubs and carried a larger-sized medical bag, his dark brown eyes meeting her with interest. A tremor of fear passed over her, and she tried to stifle it. I hear we're finally having a baby, Elijah said, a smile spreading across his face. Maureen moved a protective hand to her belly and managed a weak nod. She'd been hoping for a quick labor, to have the baby before he showed up so she could have a few hours alone with them, to tell them how much she loved them, and how sorry she was she had to give them away. She wanted to see how much they looked like her and how much they looked like... Well, she didn't even know who the father was. It didn't matter. She couldn't keep them. If the baby was Andrew's, how the hell would she explain keeping it a secret? And if it was Seamus's? She let out a long sigh. In exchange for her silence and continued compliance with Sin and Legacy Inc., Elijah agreed to let her give up the baby for adoption. It was not a small ask, and the reason her stay had been so long. Maureen's gaze locked on the stranger, the one who must be taking her baby away. A wave of sadness churned beneath the surface, where she'd been burying her fear, and she fought to keep the tears at bay, blinking furiously to no avail. They checked in with the midwife, reviewing the notes she maintained on the clipboard. How much longer? Elijah asked. Hard to say. She's been in labor for about 15 hours, the midwife said. Elijah looked up and caught her eye. Instead of the caring and compassion she'd gotten used to the last several years, his eyes darkened and he smirked. Oh, that won't do. Fear seized her chest. It was as if she was 16 again, back inside the interrogation room, strapped to a chair. She was not his equal. She was his prey. What, what do you mean? Maureen asked. I'm on a timeline, Maureen. This baby should have been out days ago. I'm sorry my being in labor is an inconvenience for you, she ground out, but the tremble of her voice was clear. Not an inconvenience, he countered, but I brought Dr. Shea to hurry things along. Sir? The midwife said. She's progressing just fine. I didn't ask you, Elijah said, turning to the woman. We've done this your way for the last 24 hours. I have other matters to attend to, so we're cutting this baby out now. What? Maureen yelled at the same time as the midwife, but the midwife continued. I cannot let you do that. Maureen slammed her lips together and Rosemary sucked in a breath beside her. Let me, Elijah crooned softly. He reached behind him and unsecured his gun, bringing it by his side. The woman eyed the weapon, her face going pale. I do whatever I damn well please, and if I say we're cutting her open and taking the fucking baby, that's what we're doing. The midwife eyed the gun and swallowed hard. Another contraction seized Maureen's body, and try as she might to hold it in, a cry left her. The tear she was holding at bay ripped free. Dr. Shea launched into motion, opening his bag and pulling out equipment and files. Rosemary, Dr. Shea said, her name familiar to him. Set up the IV drip. Maureen stared wide-eyed at Rosemary, who avoided looking at her. Had she known this was going to happen? Oh, Elijah, please. Maureen tried to sit up, but could hardly move. Just give me the chance. He's got to have some other medicine that can help me. A gunshot echoed through the room, and Maureen jumped, her heart racing, hands flying to her body to make sure she hadn't been shot. She looked frantically back at Elijah, his gaze on the dead midwife in front of him. He curled his lip and looked up. I'm sorry, Maureen, but the timeline has changed. This baby comes out now, or I put the next bullet in both of you and cut my losses. Your choice. She opened and closed her mouth several times, words refusing to form. What did he mean, cut his losses? He'd been on board with this plan since day one. He'd been kind, almost fatherly. What happened in the last 24 hours? But there wasn't time to think it through. He had murder in his eyes, and she had moments to agree. Okay, she said, nodding. Okay. She looked at Dr. Shea for guidance, and he frowned. This isn't going to hurt, he said. It's going to make everything much better. Rosemary? Let me see your arm, Rosemary said, fingers waiting for permission to touch her. But Maureen didn't give it. What are you giving me? Fluids, antibiotics, all pretty standard stuff, Dr. Shea assured. And even though she didn't trust Elijah at that moment, Maureen looked to him for confirmation, the memory of Jeffrey's violating sin trip racing through her mind. Let me see them, she said, sitting straighter, trying to ignore the dead body on the floor. The vials. Dr. Shea nodded and pulled out a few bags of fluids and several smaller vials. He put them into her waiting hand, and she expected the labels. Nothing she hadn't seen Eileen use, and the lack of bright blue or yellow eased her mind. Okay, she said, and handed them back, and gave her arm to Rosemary. She looked to Elijah again as Rosemary and Dr. Shea sat up, gritting her teeth against another contraction. He paced at the foot of the bed, fingers interlocked behind his back. Roll over, please, Dr. Shea instructed. She did, wanting to ask Elijah what prompted this sudden visit, but knowing his patience wasn't to be tested. This is going to be cold. She shivered as he wiped the area, a pinch following. This one will be a little bit of pressure. Maureen's breath hitched at the sting, and she tried to breathe through it. I'm going to need you to sit straight up. It's important you don't move. Dr. Shea instructed Maureen to lie back down, and it only took 10 minutes for the anesthesia to kick in. The sterile scent of alcohol and antiseptic filled the room. Maureen's hand trembled at her side, one of the only parts of her that still had full sensation, and she clenched them into weak fists. Elijah joined them, mild curiosity in his expression, and she looked away, feeling like an object on display and not a mother about to give birth. Dr. Shea's voice remained calm, steady, almost too casual for what was about to happen. You might feel some pressure, but there shouldn't be any pain. Maureen looked away, not wanting to see him cut her open. She knew pressure, but this was an intense pulling, a deep tugging inside her, like her insides were being shifted and rearranged. The sensation made her stomach turn, her breath coming shallow and uneven. Rosemary hovered nearby, arms crossed over her chest, as if debating whether to watch or turn away as Dr. Shea tore into Maureen's stomach. She flicked her gaze over, catching Maureen's eye. An encouraging smile lifted her lips. You're doing fine, she muttered, her voice lacking its usual bite. The minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. The room was too quiet, save the soft clinking of surgical tools and Dr. Shea's occasional instructions. Maureen focused on the cracks in the ceiling she hadn't noticed before. It looked like a tree, and she traced the lines around and around, anything to keep her mind from the reality of what was happening. There was a sharp shift in pressure, and Maureen gasped. Another tug, and then a cry. High and thin at first, then a strong wail broke through the silence, and Maureen let out a cry of relief and looked down, the fear and anger vanishing as Dr. Shea lifted the baby from her abdomen. For a moment, Maureen forgot about the weight of her limbs, the numbness, the exhaustion threatening to pull her under. He checked for any complications and cut the cord before nodding. "Congratulations, it's a girl," he announced, his tone lighter than before. He adjusted his grip as he wrapped the newborn in a clean cloth. "A girl?" Elijah said, disappointment lacing the words. The world seemed to crash down around her. She'd forgotten he was there to take her baby away from her. "She's perfect," Maureen said defensively. "Let me hold her." She turned her head slightly, just enough to see Rosemary hesitating, caught between her usual indifference and something softer, as she took the baby from Dr. Shea, so he could stitch her up. Maureen's heart skipped several beats as she took in the tiny flailing limbs, fists curling and uncurling. Her skin was fair, almost translucent, a stark contrast to the wild shock of red hair atop her head. It clung in damp curls against her soft scalp, her tiny face scrunched up in protest, her mouth open in a wail that filled the room, her tiny nose wrinkling with the effort. Maureen sunk her teeth into her lip as Rosemary brought her closer. She was Seamus's. Shame washed over her. She'd hoped it was Andrew's, so she could believe in her heart that she and Seamus hadn't done what they thought. A deep sadness followed that, knowing that she could never tell him. He would never know a piece of them existed in the world. "Here," Rosemary said, her voice quieter now as she carefully brought the baby closer. Maureen barely had the strength to lift her arms, but she reached out anyway, her fingers brushing against the warm, delicate skin. A lump formed in her throat. She hadn't cried through the pain, through the fear, through the unbearable loneliness of the last several months, but now, looking at her daughter for the first time, the tears slipped free. Dr. Shea was still working, still stitching, still speaking in that same even tone, but Maureen barely heard him. This was her baby, a small piece of her who survived this shitty world and can go on to be better than she was, live a happier and freer life than she could ever give her in the legacy. Maureen reached out with the other hand to take her, and Elijah grabbed Rosemary's arm, pulling her back. Rosemary secured the baby to her chest and looked at her father in disbelief. "She's not yours," he said, his heavy look landing on Maureen. "Wait, I know I agreed," Maureen said. "I know, please let me hold her," she pleaded, trying to sit taller, but she couldn't move. She looked down at Dr. Shea for help, and Elijah put a hand out for him to stop. He paused mid-stitch, her abdomen still gaping. "What are you doing?" Panic raced through Maureen's veins, and she looked to Rosemary for help, but Rosemary looked just as terrified as she felt. Maureen's baby secured tightly into her chest. "Please, I just want to hold her once before you take her away and I never see her again." "And why do you think you'll never see her again?" Elijah asked lightly. "Because you said—" Maureen looked over at the baby. Her baby. "I have done everything you've asked." "And you will continue to do so," Elijah agreed, "because if you don't, I will make sure you witness the complete ruin of this child, and the team will learn of your betrayal." "You promised me an adoption." "I did. And Rosemary will be the one adopting." "What?" Rosemary exclaimed. She looked down at the bundle of joy in her arms, to Maureen with terror in her eyes, and to her father. "No, I don't want—" "Did you think I was going to let my most valuable piece of leverage be shipped off to some orphanage?" Elijah sneered. "You are out of your goddamn mind. Rosemary will raise the child as her own, our very first wayward heir of the generation, and you will convince Francis, my children, and the rest of your team that Legacy Inc. is the future, or there won't be a future for that bastard." Maureen was sure she had been shot, or dosed with sin, or her entire body had been submerged in Arctic water as a roaring filled her ears she couldn't clear. He was stealing her baby. He was going to ruin her innocent life and make her watch. "No!" she screamed, breaking through her panic, but she still couldn't move. "Rosemary!" she cried, reaching for the baby. Rosemary hesitated, looking to her father for permission to step forward. Please, let me take her." She looked back to Elijah. "I'll tell them I found her," she said, throwing the first idea that popped into her head. "I'll say I saved her. I'll say anything. Please, let me have her back." Her voice broke on the final word. "You stay in line. You will get to see her grow up. See her become something better than you could ever be." Maureen sobbed, a shiver overcoming her as she looked down at her still open wound. Dr. Shea waiting for instructions like a fucking dog. 30 seconds, Elijah said suddenly. Hope blossomed in her chest, and Maureen looked up at him as he nodded to Rosemary. Maureen tried to sit up again as Rosemary laid the baby down in her arms. The bundle felt impossibly small, warm and fragile against her trembling fingers. Maureen forced herself to look down, to memorize every detail before the moment slipped away. The baby's tiny face was still pink and scrunched from birth. Her lips parted as she took in the world for the first time. The tuft of damp, fiery red hair clung to her scalp. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uncertain breaths, and Maureen traced a fingertip over the impossibly soft curve of her cheek. A sharp pull came from deep in her chest, an ache so raw it made her breath hitch. This was her daughter, a piece of her in a way no one else had ever been. Her fingers curled protectively around the tiny hand resting against her chest, tracing the delicate, perfect fingers. How could anyone look at their own child and feel anything but this? This desperate, all-consuming need to shield, to protect, to love. And yet, her own mother had looked at her and felt nothing but contempt. The thought lodged like a splinter in her throat. Had she ever been held like this? Had her mother ever traced her features with wonder? Or had she only ever been seen as a burden, a disappointment, a mistake? Her throat burned, and she swallowed it down, knowing deep in her bones Elijah would not get away with this. Maureen would burn the earth to protect this child. She forced herself to memorize the weight in her arms, the warmth of her skin, the faint, instinctive grasp of tiny fingers curling around her own. It's time, Elijah said. Maureen shook her head, taking in every minute detail she could. Rosemary reached for her, and Maureen held her tighter. Please, she begged, and looked up at Rosemary. But Rosemary had built a mask and slipped it on, retreating into the safety of the dutiful daughter. Please give her to me, Maureen. But Maureen couldn't let go. They were going to have to rip her from her cold, dead hands. I can't, she whispered back. Rosemary leaned down, wrapped her arms around the baby, and whispered in her ear. What's her name? She met Maureen's terrified gaze, dropping her mask for just a moment. Mo, we only have minutes. Her name. Catherine, Maureen breathed. Catherine the Great had seized the throne and held it with sheer will, surviving betrayal, shaping an empire. Her daughter would need that same unyielding strength to endure what lay ahead until Maureen could come for her. Catherine, Rosemary agreed. Maureen pressed her lips to Catherine's forehead, the sweet baby smell invading her senses, and she held her breath, trying to code it into her being. I love you, she whispered. Stay strong. I'm coming back for you. It took every ounce of strength to let her go, and as Rosemary stepped away, a huge chunk of her soul snapped off. Maureen swallowed around the knot jammed in her throat and looked back down at Dr. Shea, trying to maintain a shred of her composure. Why haven't you closed it yet? But Elijah answered instead. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to recover from a cesarean, he said. Did you know that? Maureen shook her head and licked her dry lips, trying to figure out what game he was playing now. He'd already stolen everything from her. He already owned her. No. You know what else takes 6 to 8 weeks to recover from? Her heart skipped a beat and she looked up at him. A gunshot. Rosemary screamed in protest, but Maureen didn't even have the opportunity to open her mouth before he pulled the trigger, the bullet piercing her open abdomen. And that is the end of chapter 34. Such a pivotal and crucial scene slash sequence. That was probably one of the hardest sequences in the book for me to write, just emotionally as a mother. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and or slightly hate me. That's fine too. I will see you guys in chapter 35.